Hey, welcome back to the channel and thank you for following and subscribing, commenting and liking our videos. Please endeavor to subscribe so that you get more updates on what's going on. Now, I've always been one of the people who came out earlier on whenever attempts to revive the Uganda Airlines were taking place. One of those people who came out and said it was a completely bad idea. Now, I've never gone to aviation school or I'm not a pilot or something of that sort, but this is information that you can clearly read on the internet and see that it was against all the odds for Uganda Airlines to survive like 5 years in its operations. Now, the government of Uganda had, under Museveni, of course, the dictator, had said that they will invest something like 400 million US dollars to acquire a few planes and then start its operations. Now, for them, they thought that, okay, a lot of money goes through Entebbe Airport. Around, I think they said around 80,000 passengers go through the airport. That contributes to millions of dollars that goes to different aircrafts, the likes of Emirates, Kenya Airways, and so on and so forth. So the government said that, I think we can have a share of that cake. And they said, okay, if we have our own airline, Ugandans will actually prefer their own airline than other airlines. Number one. The other issue, they thought that, government, government guys, the leaders, the people in government, ministers, blah, 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 and whenever they are going for foreign trips, they should use Uganda Airline, the national aircraft. And they also banked on the issue of tourists, that if any tourist is coming to Uganda, they would easily have direct flights from wherever they are coming from. Like, I think they have direct flights from Dubai and also direct flights from London, because they secured landing rights in these places early this year. Now, all those would have been good if at all the government of Uganda did not have any competition. Now, in the region where we are, especially in Africa, one of the strongest airlines is Ethiopian Airline. They mastered the art on how to run an airline, and no other African country has matched their way of doing things. Now, Kenya Airways has been also in the region struggling. Tanzania Airways has been struggling. Rwanda Air has been struggling. South African Airlines struggling. Egyptian Air struggling. Nigerian Air revived but struggling. And then you bring Uganda Airlines. Now that's really interesting, because that's why you at times think that who are the people that really advise this Museveni guy? Because how can you invest 400 million, of which that is not the only losses you're going to make, but on top of the 400 million, you're still going to add in more money in order to keep the airline afloat? Now, it was projected that the airline would make a few losses, but in 5 years' time or 10 years' time, it will start making profits. And then COVID happened. Now, when COVID happened, we spent almost 6 months of aircrafts standing still and not flying. And you know very well, an airplane that is not flying is not making money. And if it is not making money, it is losing money. As simple as that. We have seen so many budget airlines here in Europe and America closing down as a result of COVID-19. Now, the aircrafts in Uganda had to be serviced and all this kind of thing. Even without COVID, they would have struggled, because Uganda Airlines had no competitive advantage. One of its trademark items that it uses to advertise when the people are boarding the airline is a Rolex. A Rolex is not a watch in Uganda. A Rolex is a chapati, something like a flat bread with a few eggs and a few cabbage and tomatoes and in there. And then they serve that one on the airline. Now, so many things I would have talked about the airline, but I want to give you an update on what is going on. Now, yesterday, I think, but one, what happened was Uganda Airlines announced that in a statement, this has been uploaded on Twitter, they said, the board of directors of Uganda Airlines wish to inform our esteemed clients and the general public that some members of our management team have taken leave. During their absence, the roles will continue to be performed by the organization in line with the human resource policies. All operations continue normally. Thank you. Pereza Godfrey Ahebwa, Chairman, Board of Directors. Now, this is what happened. Uganda Airlines hired one of the best CEOs in running airlines in sub-Saharan Africa. Like they said, he's called Conwell Muleya. Now, Conwell Muleya is a Zambian whom they hired to run the aircraft ever since it was revived, and he has been the man in charge. Now, all of a sudden, he has been fired, citing mismanagement, corruption, and so many other things. Now, according to, this is the gentleman called Conwell Muleya. Now, according to the airspaceafrica.com, Uganda Airlines CEO fired amid huge shakeup at the state-owned carrier. Unease, shock, and nerves described the current mood at Uganda Airlines, where a shakeup is currently underway. According to sources, the top hierarchy, including the CEO, Conwell Muleya, have been sent packing after a dramatic intervention by the Transport Minister, General Katumba Wamala, on orders from the State House. State-owned media has reported that up to 10 of Uganda Airlines top management, including the CEO, financial director, head of security, and human resource director, have gone on a 3-month leave. But the move, according to a source, is due to allegations of corruption, mismanagement, and poor performance within the state-owned entity, and will allow for a full investigation into the matter. An acting CEO, Captain Stephen Wegoye, has been appointed to oversee the transition. Both the Transport Minister and the head of Uganda Airlines board have maintained in a response of state-owned media that the entire management team had simply taken their accumulative leave. This at a time when the airline is stepping up operations for route expansions to Johannesburg and a network of to long-haul destinations in the Middle East, Europe, and Asia. Now, earlier this year, the Ugandan Auditor General presented a report to the country's parliament, which identified the airline as the country's worst-performing state-owned entity. The carrier made a loss of 102 billion Ugandan shillings from 27 billion Ugandan shillings. 102 billion Ugandan shillings, that is 27 million US dollars in the previous financial year. Now, just to let you know, a year before that, the airline, when it was opened up, it made a loss of 20 billion Ugandan shillings. Now, that was an increase of more than 100% in terms of losses. Now, remember, the government of Uganda spent something like 400 million US dollars to revive this airline. Now, the Auditor General noted that 10 state enterprises had debt ratios of more than 50%, implying that their total assets were insufficient to cover their total debt. This list included the Uganda Civil Aviation Authority with a gearing ratio of 51.17% in 2018-2019 financial year and a ratio of 48.8% in the 2019 and 2020 financial year. The Uganda National Airlines Company Limited had a gearing ratio of 2.37 in 2018 financial year and a ratio of 0.48 in 2019-2020 financial year. Now, what that means is that the debts are even more, the debts that Uganda Airlines have are even more, what do you call it? That the debts are more valuable than the entire airline itself, because they used 400 million to buy the airline, to recover it, to revive it. Now, the government of Uganda, I think, contributed 70 million Ugandan shillings, and then they borrowed 370 million US dollars, and then the government of Uganda borrowed 330 million US dollars from different lenders. In fact, they approached the Canadian bank where they bought these aircrafts from, the Canadian government, and refused to give them a loan. Now, what this means is, according to the Auditor General's report, that even the debt that Uganda Airlines has is more valuable than the airline itself. Now, I don't know what sort of business that is, where the debt is even more valuable than the loss, according to the debt ratios. Now, but in the media release, the airline denied the existence of any form of debt, saying Uganda Airlines is fully capitalized by shareholders and has no debt. Unfortunately, as Ugandans, we don't know any of those shareholders. On its balance sheet, all the aircraft and other assets were paid for by cash from the shareholders. Uganda Airlines therefore doesn't have any loans or interest payments to any financier. They denied. But the airline is in debt. They look here. Right now, Uganda is drowning in debt. We are almost hitting our debt ratio of 50%. We are at 75, I think, 0.7%. In fact, Museveni is calling on his lenders to postpone the debt repayment. Now, what happens whenever they postpone debt repayment with Museveni? He goes back and asks for more loans, which is really interesting. So when we hit that threshold of 50%, it means that the Ugandan economy will no longer be able to borrow money, and the economy will come crashing in one way or the other. But this is important for the Uganda Airlines, because these things they should have known earlier. Now a lot of money is going into so many things, and it is said that these people, whenever they were purchasing things, the things they purchased were like 3 times more than the real price. But that is not right. The other issue is the firing of the CEO Muleya is that the government is trying to cut losses. The airline is already making losses, and so they have to cut more losses, because the CEO these are the top people that take a lot of money. Human resource, finance, the CEO, they take a lot of money. So you have to fire them. Now, when you fire them, you have to bring in someone that you have to pay less. There's a saying that goes, buy cheap, buy more. Like the more you buy cheap stuff, the more you are most likely to go back and buy again. Buy cheap, buy again. That's the saying. So the government is going to hire a cheap CEO. But basically, Museveni is going to hire someone who is related to him and something of that sort to run the airline, who is actually going to technically bring it to its complete demise. And that is going to happen because most of these people don't know how to even run an airline. The transport minister himself has a military background, who doesn't know anything at all on how to run transport and all this kind of thing. Now, we also know that there is too much government interference in airlines. The reason as to why the Ethiopian airline has managed to survive all this time is because there is no government interference. So many things can happen in Ethiopia, but they do not intervene in the Ethiopian airlines. In Uganda, the ministers want to take free trips. They want to go and visit their girlfriends abroad. They want to go and eat, food, and go to hotels without paying, meaning that the airline is not making any profits. You get it? So the government can come in anytime and say, you know what, I've fired you, I've fired this one, meaning that there is no job security. So who would like to work in such conditions? Meaning that will not attract the right people to actually run an airline. Now, first and foremost, even if you have the right people to run the airline, the market is completely dominated by Ethiopian Airlines. Kenya Air is already crowded. You cannot make it. It is very hard. The odds are stacked against you. I don't know. Now, let us look around the region, because Kenya has an airline, Tanzania has an airline, as well as Rwanda. What is happening in these other countries? Now, when you look at Tanzania, according to the Citizen, CEGI's report shows ATCL made a loss of 60 billion. In Uganda, we made a loss of 102 billion. Tanzania, they made 60 billion. This was one of Magufuli's initiative to revive Air Tanzania. And so far, it made 60 billion losses last year. The Control and Auditor General's report of the financial year 2019-2020 has revealed that Air Tanzania Limited is among the loss-making government entities. According to the report, ATCL, the national carrier, recorded a loss of 60 billion shillings in the financial year under review. Quote, "We have discovered that ATCL has made losses of up to 60 billion. But also in the past 5 years, this company has been making losses annually. There are several challenges that the government ought to address immediately," said Charles Kichele. This is despite having received additional equipment in terms of aircrafts that were bought by the government to aid the company's performance. However, analysts say that the period under review was one of the most difficult ones in the aviation industry due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, which forced most countries to go into lockdown. Air Tanzania Company Limited consequently suspended all of its international flights in response with effect from March 25th. In an interview with The Citizen, Ladislav Matindi said the company reached the decision to suspend flights to Mumbai, Entebbe, Bujumbura, following a ban from the said countries while its Komoro route opened for the last time on March 23rd. The company only resumed international flights in October 2020 after close to 7 months lay-off. So like you can see, even in Tanzania, they are making losses, 60 billion shillings. That is Tanzanian shillings, not Ugandan shillings. Now, if you compute that to Ugandan shillings, it might even be to something like 90 billion Ugandan shillings. Air Tanzania making those losses. Now, some people have the argument. I'll come to that point as well. Okay, now let's look at Air Rwanda Air, sorry. Rwanda Air also revived its airline. Now, they say, according to LinkedIn, this is a gentleman known as Thomas Lomcheki, a global aviation entrepreneur executive. He says, one cannot question the great wisdom of Girma Wake, the ex-CEO of Ethiopian Airways and now chairman of Rwanda Air. The airline has 12, you see, now this one is the ex-CEO of Rwanda Air, but now, sorry, of Ethiopian Airlines, one of the most successful airlines in the country. He was hired by Rwanda Air. But it is not all about hiring CEOs and, people who are, know what to do. Although that one counts, but still, it's all about the market. It's all about the intricacies and, there's so many restrictions on air travel in Africa. Air travel has not been profitable in Africa for a long time. The airline has 12 aircrafts, blah, 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 with 21 destinations. But having been founded in 2002 and started operations in 2003, it has yet to see a profit. In fact, from 2010 to 2015, it received 170 million US dollars in state subsidies. Now, remember, this is a country with just 11 million people, with a GDP of 18 billion US dollars as of 2015, or a GDP of a very low $697 per capita. Rwanda's investment relies significantly on stable inflows of foreign aid. As Rwanda's investment relies significantly on foreign aid, stable inflows of this foreign aid are critical to keep the current high investment rate at around 25% of the GDP. In addition, reducing the country's dependence on foreign aid, which is 30% to 40% of the budget, through domestic resource mobilization is critical. While Rwanda has been effectively using aid for development, the country remains vulnerable to fluctuations in aid flows. It is hard to see how they want to make Rwanda Air a money maker, yet Ethiopia Airlines, which has 99.4 million people, and it's been around since 1946, to make money like, let me repeat that statement. It is hard to see how they want, that is to say Rwanda Air, Tanzanian Air, Kenya Airways, Uganda Airways, put your country's airline there. A moneymaker like Ethiopian Airlines, which has 99 million people, and it has been around since 1946. The other big airlines in Africa are Kenya Airways, South African Airways, Egyptian Air. All are in big financial trouble and have much bigger populations and GDPs than GDPs. Kenya has 46 million people. GDP per capita is $1,000. South Africa has 55 million people. GDP per capita is $5,000. Egypt has 92 million people. GDP per capita is $3 million. My worry is, did they replace the CEO John Milenge in April with Colonel Chance in Dangano and military people in Africa? In Dangano, military people in Africa make lousy executives. So, I am no optimist on Landa's Air's success. As long as $2 billion in foreign aid comes in, it can afford to subsidize the airline. But that can be volatile and unpredictable. What can be volatile and unpredictable, especially in Central Africa. It is hard to see how they want to make Rwanda Air a moneymaker like Ethiopian Airlines, which has 99.4 million people, and it has been around since 1946. And when the foreign aid dries up, who will subsidize this? Where did so many African state-subsidized airlines disappear to? Air Afrique, East African Airways, Air Gabon, Cameroon Airways, Air Zimbabwe, Ghana Airways, Nigerian Airways, Air Zambia, Air Uganda, Air Mali, Air Guinea, Air Ivory Coast, etc. All gone. Will Rwanda Air become another Kenya Airways or South African Airways today? State-owned airlines are drowning in debt because they cannot make money flying passengers and cargo, as you cannot have a long-term sustainable business without making money, as state aid will run out one day for all airlines in Africa. And we are seeing that in Angola, Mozambique, and many other countries. Now, that was a long article, but it gives you an idea that Rwanda Air is also making losses, and it is also struggling. Now, the other last airline I would like us to look at is the Kenya Airways. Now, this is 2021. Losses treble at Kenya Airways amid worst year of traffic since 1999. This is according to Flight Global. Now, Kenya Airways losses tripled to Kenyan shillings 36 billion. Now, that's like 120 billion Ugandan shillings. That is 325 million US dollars for the 12 months to December 2020. A year in which the pandemic disruption led to passenger levels falling to the lowest level since 1999. We even saw Kenya Airways removing the seats and starting to use the planes for cargo. Now, the SkyTeam carrier reports revenues during the years slumped by 58.8% to Kenyan shillings 52.8 billion, reflecting a 65% fall in passenger numbers to a 1.8 million. Kenya Airways carried around 70% of the passengers in the first quarter before the pandemic fully hit. Now, while the airline cut costs during the year, 38% of these still stood at almost Kenyan shillings 80 billion. As a result, Kenya Airways postponed an operation loss of just over 27 billion in 2020 compared with a loss of 2 billion the previous year. That is in Kenyan shillings. The airline's attributed full year loss increased from Kenyan shillings 13 billion to 36 million Kenyan shillings. While hedging losses dragged it to a comprehensive loss of 46 billion for 2020. Now, literally, you don't even have to look any further. For all the 3 East African countries that have read for you and have brought up articles for you, there is no word where it says profit. It is all saying losses, losses, losses. Uganda Airlines 102 billion losses. Tanzanian Air 60 billion losses. Kenya Airways 36 billion Kenyan shillings losses. Rwanda Air recently they went into a partnership, I think, with Qatar Airways, and they sold most of their fleet to Qatar Airways because they could no longer afford the airline. And now Uganda, 2 years ago, because Museveni wanted to be popular, reviving this populist stuff and exciting people. Oh, Museveni brought back the airline. Oh, Museveni. It is people, you see, Africans, we get so much excited with such kind of things. These are just populist things that governments do in order to receive popularity and the pride. Airlines are not all about pride in they're not all about lifting people out of poverty and pride in Africa. They are all lifting people out of poverty. They are all about pride of these particular leaders, and the same applies to Uganda. So the issue in Uganda, you cannot spend 400 million US dollars on airlines that are not, they're not even employing like 200,000 people. Now, there's this idea in East Africa where leaders say that airlines will promote tourism. Well, there's no evidence that airlines have any African airline that there's no correlation, or there's no evidence that African airlines have promoted tourism. right? I'm yet to see that evidence, because anyone who is coming to visit Kenya or Rwanda, Burundi, or these countries, they will look for the best airlines. They will look for the best airlines. If at all Kenya is one of the biggest tourism destinations in Africa, then the airline would have been making better money. It would have been making real money. It would not have been struggling. You see the logic here? Because Kenya has a big tourism sector. Rwanda as well. So it means that the people who are coming to visit Kenya are choosing other airlines rather than Kenya Airways. Now, we should also understand that tourists, for example, if a tourist is British and they have British Airways flying to Nairobi, they are most likely to board British Airways than Kenya Airways. Now, if a tourist is maybe Dutch, is from Netherlands or Holland, is most likely to board KLM if it comes to Uganda or Rwanda than boarding Rwanda Air. Because number one, first of all, the services, poor customer care, poor services, and all this kind of thing has ravaged almost of African airlines. Now, if a situation arose where someone has to board Kenya Airways or Air Tanzania and all these other airlines, and then you have KLM and you have these big players, Emirates, which are heavily subsidized. You have the Qantas and all these airlines. There is no way you are going to make them. No way we are going to make money out of it. Now, for us in Uganda, we are just looking on, because me myself, with how Museveni has treated me, my brothers and sisters, incarcerated so many people in Uganda, do not expect me to support Museveni by boarding Uganda Airlines. Because when I board Uganda Airlines, I'm giving him my money. So I'm not going to do that. I'll look for another airline that I can use if I'm to travel. Even if they give me free tickets, free transport, whatever, on Uganda Airlines, I cannot board it, because it would be enabling a dictatorship to arrest more of my brothers and sisters, to kill more of my brothers and sisters. Because even if I do not do that, all of a sudden this airline, I would give it just 2 years. And trust me, everything is just going to change. With the rampant economic situation that is happening in the country, extravagant spending, and spending a lot of money on projects that the country does not even need, that is a sign of absolute crazy leadership. When Museveni gets loans, he's usually kind of like, his spending goes way over roof, like out of the roof, and it's always usually, it's like spending on steroids. He's looking so fast to see how he can get that money out and spend it all, and do all sorts of things. You see people saying, oh, he built roads, oh, he built this, he built that. No. That, oh, he has revived the railway. You revived the railway, yes, the standard gauge railway. What are you going to transport? Railways are also ventures that actually do not make a lot of money. If you come to countries like London and you look at and you study the railway system here, see how it works. How can you make it work for Ugandans? One of the most successful railways in the world is the one in India and maybe China. It's because these countries have very many people, right? Very many people that, use these railways. But then the priorities of the government of Uganda, or the priorities under Museveni, really amaze me a lot. And priorities of African leaders in general, they really amaze me a lot. Because instead of getting money and investing it in things that really help people, improving access to the internet, improving access to electricity, you are opening up a new airline when people are still starving in your country. You're opening up a new airline when people uneducated, they cannot even use the internet, they don't even have access to clean water and things like that. And then you're investing 400 million US dollars. Well, for us, we shall just look on. But that's it for today, and I hope I don't know what to hope for, but there is no way this is going to recover. It has only begun with the firing of the CEO. You know that thing, whenever Uganda Cranes fails to win or fails to qualify, they always blame the manager. And what they do, they always fire the manager and blame him. Oh, this manager, blah, 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 blah. I think we need a local manager to manage these things. They forget that the thing is not all about management. Thing is all about political interference and stuff like that. Everything in Uganda is politicized, and the Uganda Airlines is no exception, just like most African countries. Thank you very much. Subscribe, comment, tell me what you think about Uganda Airlines and everything that has happened to this airline and what is happening around East Africa. If you're watching me from your country, let me know about your airline and what you think about government spending on these ventures that are loss making instead of being profit making. All right, bye.